Recently, I found myself offered the rather wonderful opportunity to take part in the PRODEUS MAPCORE mapping competition. That said, I was a little late to the party to take part as an actual mapper. Rather, I had been offered the role of an all-powerful guest judge. For those unaware, PRODEUS itself comes replete with a surprisingly robust level editor, and in terms of what you can create with these tools, well, how about a level where you're hopping between trucks, blasting extra-dimensional abominations, all the while just positively careening down a highway? Just think, this was an example of what was possible with PRODEUS's level editor back when the game initially released. You can probably imagine my excitement then at having the chance to now judge a selection that has not only benefited from more time and familiarity with the editor, but a selection that is also very much cream of the crop. All in all, 5 maps made the final cut, each offering something a little different and ultimately being judged on the variables of fun, originality, visual presentation, and polish. The sum total of each score between the judges naturally deciding the winner, but for me, I also sprinkled in my own personal rankings. So without further ado, let me take you on somewhat of a guided tour, in ascending order no less, of the PRODEUS MAPCORE finalists. Having arrived via monorail, the introductory section of Extraction seems very keen to impress, what with its sweeping views encompassing monolithic skyscrapers poking out from the sunlit atmospheric haze. A passing hovercar overhead very much cements its Blade Runner aspirations, but this is not where we're going to be spending the majority of our time here. Our objective leading us inside a nearby building. Before you even enter said building, however, you'll find evidence that something here has gone just a tad wrong. Navigating the corpses and adding maybe the odd one or two to the pile, you'll eventually use a cargo truck to gain entry to the vents, and as you do, the HUD finally slides into view, indicating that shit should very imminently be hitting the fan. But that said, Extraction takes its time, very much focused with drawing you in and building the tension. Your journey ever deeper into the building met with suspiciously light resistance. As a result, you're more incentivized to sniff around. Poking your nose around the building lobby, for example, will find you working your way into a broken lift shaft where you'll be able to bag yourself the blue key card, which ultimately will prove useful further along the way as it grants access to useful supply rooms. The lobby soon gives way to an internal monorail station, though at this point, it's best advised to heed the call of nature before you drop down to the tracks. The toilets here offering up a quad shotty and possibly the lethal consequences of Taco Tuesday. Heading down, you'll find one of the trains here can be shunted about to gain access to even more supplies, and at this point you start to worry about the fact that this map is being just ever so generous when all you've been dealing with so far are largely the lower tier, rank and file. The station soon gives way to deeper reaches. A pair of shredders overlooks an ominous room, and a busted flame-ridden corridor contains a yellow key necessary to progress. Past the yellow door itself, things heat up just a smidge with more shotgunners and toxic explosive hazmat zombies, but nothing that the shredders, or the grenade launcher for that matter, can't handle. After eviscerating an enemy, you may note that the platform it was stood on allows you access to an upper reach where you'll be able to acquire the plasma rifle, and honestly at this point you may be feeling just a little overdressed for the occasion, but worry not, because reaching the wonderfully named Chaos Lab is where the tension finally breaks. Hacking the mainframe here triggers an alarm, and out from the dimensional rift spills the Horde. I'll be honest, it's nice to finally have an excuse to cut loose with all of this heavy weaponry, because let's face it, there's only so much satisfaction you can glean from obliterating the occasional small fry. Oh, a minigun you say? Don't mind if I do. So, now that we're done clearing out the Chaos Lab, where next? Well, remember all that ominously vacant space we traversed between the lobby and here? Yeah, time to fight our way all the way back to the lobby, only now those same corridors are absolutely packed to the gills with enemies. The action on the return trip here is just borderline relentless. You've got a relatively early showing from a group of Proteans, forcing you to once again lean on the heavier of your weaponry before spitting you out into an encounter that'll force you to prioritize some distant threats such as arc rail snipers, while also dealing with a lot of up-close and personal melee harassers. It's some relatively high-intensity stuff, forcing you to keep on the move, and all things considered, I was starting to feel just a tad exhausted by the time I reached the upper side of the internal station. I mean, there's only so many Void Reapers you can run through in quick succession before you start to get a little numb to their presence. Mercifully, the short walk between the station and the lobby gives you precious opportunity to catch a little bit of breath, because, oh boy, the lobby itself. Good grief, they just keep coming, wave after wave of escalating enemy types, forcing you to swap between available weapons as you nervously watch that ammo count dwindle, culminating in this thing. So anyway, after mincing what feels like an army of the damned alongside what I'm just going to call a chaos golem, I know it's called the Hunter, but my name's cooler, you step out into the sunlight just thoroughly drenched in gore, and oh god, it's not over yet. Jesus Christ, this is like the fourth Void Reaper I've had to mince. So yeah, I think it's safe to say that the chaos very much follows you outside during the final stretches of this map, and if the trip between here and the train wasn't already busy enough, you've also got a little bit of Protean interference. So yeah, inter-faction fighting, buffed enemies, you know, just all around throw in the kitchen sink, end of level type madness. But anyway, excuse me, make way, I have a goddamn train to catch. Not bad. Not bad at all. Dispensing with pretty much any kind of preamble, Vulkan Facility pretty much chucks you in the deep end, throws you a shotgun as soon as you spawned, and tells you to get to work as fiends chuck fireballs at you from above while you tackle zombies in the limited space of its opening, explosive-lined courtyard. If anything, this high-pressure welcoming committee forms a pretty effective mission statement for how much a Vulkan Facility is going to go. I mean, if you need proof of that, immediately after dropping into a service tunnel to escape the courtyard, you'll find yourself harassed by a lunger, and if you manage to artfully dodge around its charge, you'll find the opposite end of said tunnel, packed shotgunners, zombies, oh, have an extra feat. You know, as a treat. Happily, the reward for dealing with that is a pair of shredders, and from there you'll make your way into the main reactor room. And I've got to admit, I'm a sucker for some large spinning industrial machinery. I just think it's neat. Anyway, clearing out the riffraff in here essentially forms a taster session for something much more intense later down the line, somewhat teased by a chain gunner patiently waiting behind some glass at the back. The upper level here presents you with a locked yellow door and access to the fiend-laden gantry from the earlier opening courtyard, where a fresh complement of enemies now await your lead. Having dealt with that, the gantry leads you through to lava processing on the opposite side, and this section actually sees a brief bit of trigger target shooting, a mechanic that, honestly, I haven't seen used all that much throughout these maps, and I was immediately curious to see if this was going to be some sort of primer for a bit more intensive trigger shooting down the line. As it happens, I was bang on the money. That said, I couldn't have predicted that it would also involve a rampaging lava whisk, where the only means of escape is a zombie-lined wall recess. Oh, and don't think you're safe just because you've cleared out the undead here, because if you linger too long in the recess, the ceiling comes down and squish. So the shutdown switch is the next trigger target you'll have to shoot, which, rather unhelpfully, is found at the top end of the lava whisk, dangling above a pit of molten rock, and I just couldn't help but think, what if some poor bastard wanders in here without a gun? I mean, what are they gonna do? Throw a shoe? Get ready to run for cover after hitting this particular switch, because your reward is a minigunner behind a one-way shield. Thankfully, the deactivation switch isn't too far away and has some decent cover for you to— oh, you son of a bitch. Sometimes I forget how tanky minigunners can actually be, especially when you're working on a limited roster of weaponry, but at the very least your reward for defeating them is a weapon that thuds so hard it could theoretically break every rib in your chest, but that's besides the point. We're here to do one thing and one thing only, and that's turn this entire room into mincemeat. There's an optional green key switch here, but for the life of me, I just couldn't find the damn thing. Probably grants access to whatever's behind this door, and knowing my luck, it was probably something like a really sweet gun. But I digress. Circling neatly back into the reactor room, the yellow key grants you access to another corridor full of pre-minced meat before leading you to an observation window, giving you a reasonably nice view of the volcano that feeds the place with lava. Neat. You know what's better than that though? A dedicated rocket launcher dispenser. And bless, they even provided gore-filled test dummies for you to explode. How thoughtful. Try not to be too trigger happy with the rocket launcher though, because you'll want to save a few rounds for the Slayer that pops up from this freshly activated access door. Slayers can buff nearby enemies, fling energy waves at you, and are generally annoying floaty little bastards, so yeah, the less time spent dealing with them, the better. Battery storage at its heart is a big old room full of zombies with a rather noticeable shoot switch that'll let you dunk them all in lava if you're handy enough at luring them in. I won't lie, it's somewhat satisfying. Hitting this switch, however, turns the room into essentially a sniper alley, but thankfully you should have your own arc rail at this point, helping even the odds and maybe obliterate some heads, and once you move over to the lift and take it up, you'll discover that the room is once again turned on its head with the presence of a Void Reaper and a pair of bloaters inviting you to an all-expenses-paid puke party. I'm not sure there's any need to emphasize just how much crawlers can suck in enclosed spaces, but here we are nonetheless, but at the very least after that it's just some good old-fashioned corridor carnage that stands between yourself, a new crimson paint job, and of course, the red key. The red key gets you access to the reactor controls. Blowing out the safeties opens up the switches, and hitting one of those switches will initiate the reactor overload process, which also has the side effect of pissing off a whole horde of interdimensional abominations, so you've got that to deal with. If anything though, the combination of enemies that spawn from hitting that first switch feel fairly inconsequential compared to the sheer unbridled chaos that results from you hitting the second switch. It's almost as if the enemy realized just how serious you were about blowing the place to smithereens and finally decided to get their respective shit together. You got lungers, fiends, arc rail snipers, crawlers, that bastard mini-gunner from earlier comes into play. There's even a Void Reaper. It's just an absolute rush of enemies, and it just feels thrillingly relentless, keeping you on the move as you dance around that overloading reactor just to hang on and stay alive. And the cherry on top after you've dealt with the lion's share of enemies here is it has the temerity, the audacity, the downright gall to throw another friggin' Slayer at you. Oh, I'd be lying if I said this one didn't get my pulse racing ever so slightly. Real fun as heck level, does a lot of really cool stuff in relatively limited space, and all I can say is bravo, Vulkan Facility, bravo. Now where did I put them sedatives? Icarus gotta get his heart rate down. Something I always seem to enjoy when it comes to visual design is a sense of being dwarfed by vast industrial machinery, being lost within the bowels of immense structures. And with that in mind, XTAL Site 2, sure hope I'm saying that title right, certainly impresses from the moment you breach its outer doors. If anything, it feels almost kind of opposite to the design philosophy found in Vulkan Facility. Instead of tension built via claustrophobia and the intensity of encounters, instead you're left wondering where exactly, when, and where the inevitable threat is going to emerge in these wide open spaces. A brief bit of zombie head popping kicks off this section and eventually leads you up to a shotgun drop and a switch. The window here offering a clean line of sight for where you'll need to aim your progression next. Before that, however, you will have to deal with the freshly spawned batch of abominations that now crowd that once wide open space. Lunges keeping you on the move, fiends applying pressure from afar, and the zombies, well, the zombies are there too. But they're trying their best, damn it. Moving on through, the deactivated force field will take you to the upper walkways of this section, allowing you to cross the lava pit that dominates its back end. You'll obliterate some faces, bag yourself an arc rail, and then enjoy the oddly satisfying animation of this connecting bridge folding out before you. An elevator ride will take you deeper into the facility, and the welcoming committee that will greet you down there is dispatched easily enough thanks to a pair of shredders that you'll have already acquired. Your reward for dealing with the committee is entry to the central chamber, and oh boy, if that isn't an awesome sight. I absolutely love the sense of scale in here. Not that you'll have much time to enjoy it before a batch of crawlers, among other things, bring your eyes back down to terra firma. I feel like there's quite the economical use of enemy spawns here. I'm sure there would have been the temptation to just absolutely flood this kind of open area with enemies, but instead the encounters here are meted out with a fair degree of thoughtful restraint, the kind of stuff that gradually builds over the course of the map. Taking out the minigunner and the bloaters will reveal a switch that, when activated, delivers yet another satisfying slice of animation. Huge restraining bolts slam back up into the ceiling, with the end result seeing that rather impressive central tower activate and spin itself up. Naturally, spectacle is followed by action, and a batch of lunges backed up by an arc rail sniper will neatly draw your attention in the direction you'll be heading next. After popping open the door and smiting a few more lunges, you'll enter a corridor and bump into what looks like a stasis tube, which actually turns out to be a neat little author cameo. Following the corridor round to the end, we'll see you enter a chamber that's just about the right size for some good old-fashioned bloodshed. After taking out the riffraff, you'll take note of a few patient enemies lurking behind a force field on your way up. And once you reach the switch, you'll discover that, yes, of course it unleashes those enemies, but it also grants you access to a handy-dandy grenade launcher. So, what better to do than get busy painting the walls with the innards? Flipping a freshly accessible switch on the central machinery here will cause a cascade of lava to flow up through the tube, bathing the room in what I must say is a rather lovely orange glow. I honestly forget how nice the lighting effects can be in this game sometimes. Exiting through a freshly accessible corridor, you'll find yourself the yellow key and a route that will lead you neatly back through to the central chamber. The flow of structures and enemy spawns here, leading you to investigate the doors on the opposing side. Mercifully, the temptation to offer up a copy-paste job on this side of the facility is sidestepped entirely, instead offering you something a little different and more visually distinct with its bold red-line corridors leading you down, inevitably, to the Crusher Room. Though that said, don't be too hasty. Hopping and jumping up to this section here will reward you with a few extra supplies, and trust me, you'll need them, because the Crusher Room is where I'd say the map goes full steam ahead with regards to its combat. You've had more than enough time to ogle the surroundings. Now it's time to get serious. A phantom spawns in the central tube, whereupon it's whisked up and away where it can benefit from one-way shields like the coward it is. From there it can pepper you with pretty much all of its attacks, forcing you to evade while you deal with pretty much everything else. Something about the Phantom that makes it a little distinct from other Protean-type enemies is that while it can't convert Chaos enemies into the blue, powered-up forms, it can, however, turn those blue versions invisible, adding just a little sting in the tail to any given encounter involving them. And while this encounter doesn't immediately throw such enemy types into the mix, believe me, it gets there eventually. Thankfully, this section pops a few resupply canisters out of the floor to keep you topped up with ammo and health respectively, before finally rewarding you with all of the effort and all of the luminous blue bloodshed, leading to the opportunity to finally press the button that powers up the Crusher and make that pesky Phantom go squish. Nice. The red key is a pretty easy get after this, the rest of the corridors leading you neatly back round to the central chamber once more, and ultimately granting you access to the final section of the map. Things follow a similar kind of template here, but on a more cozy scale than what preceded it. That said, it is worth investigating the main chamber as thoroughly as you can before getting down to business. The lower area here handily providing a rocket launcher supply closet, ideal for clearing out those pesky beefed-up abominations in the east wing. Having made a mess of everything in your way, you can reach the control station at the back, which will bag you a quad shotty and access to the west wing of the chamber, which for the most part is just full of ready-to-mince enemies. Even the likes of the formerly tanky minigunner crumbling before the power of a full barrel blast to the face. Flicking the switch up here in the control room will reveal your final objective of the map, a section of fuel line that needs destroying. Naturally, doing so is gonna piss off a whole bunch of big and nasty. You'd have to have been a little bit blind not to spot the hunter that's been patiently waiting behind the force field in this chamber. Much like the other special types, their mere presence can make any given fight just that little bit tougher, not because of the ability to shoot fireballs at you, not just because they can summon explosions that leave puddles of lava all over the place, but because much like the floaty bastard that is the Slayer, it can also buff nearby creatures. The following fight is pleasingly intense, tough but fair, meaty but chewy. I'm sure I was going somewhere with these descriptors, but regardless, it's fun. Anyway, bringing down the hunter and obliterating everything else in the room will open the exit, and an emergency elevator here will handily catapult you away from the imminently exploding facility back towards the surface. But yeah, there you go, just a tremendously well-made map, wonderful sense of scale, and just a tremendous degree of polish throughout. Really enjoyed making my way through this one. There's a lot of things about Altitude that just radiate cool. The first few moments see you swoop down into battle aboard an AI-controlled dropship, and shortly after you'll witness your first objective, an anti-air emplacement, blow a bomber out of the sky as it attempts to reach an ominous fortress enshrouded in the distance. I feel like the best way to describe the progression here of Altitude is bite-sized chunks of high-concept and high-intensity action. This first section, for example, facing you off against a shielded shotgunner at the top of a locked-off elevator, forcing you to fight your way up its heavily guarded halls till you reactivate it and dole out some satisfying retribution. You could almost call it a microcosm of most encounters to come during the course of this map. A strong setup followed by a satisfying payoff. Surfacing on the opposing side of the building, you'll find the anti-air emplacement within sight. The only thing standing in your way, a building full of even more enemies eager to help you paint the walls a very particular shade of crimson. Emerging on the roof and obliterating a handful more enemies, you'll hit the shutdown switch for the anti-air and witness your AI dropship buddy take advantage of the cleared airspace to destroy a radio antenna. Ingeniously, this will allow you to cross the divide and continue on your merry rampage. Like I said, it just radiates cool. Something else I really like about this map is just how much mileage it gets out of the shotgun before it decides to throw you something else, and when it does, it makes you work for it, damn it. This section here is a pretty good example of that. Trying your best to evade a minigunner while dancing around bubbling lava and a crowd of pesky zombies makes it pick up all the sweeter when you bring that minigunner down and spin that barrel up for, guess what? That's right, full mincemeat mode. Somewhat inconveniently, the front door of the next building is locked off, forcing you to search for alternate means of entry. This can be done by hopping around some precarious outer ledges and breaching through the vents. Inside, you'll be greeted with a lovely war reception, shortly followed by a force field ambush, deactivating it, requiring you to carve your way down this corridor, flicking a switch, hoovering up all the supplies you can get, including this handy-dandy grenade launcher, and mincing yet another minigunner. Finding your way out the back of the building will see you greeted by what seems to be an impassable gap. Sure would be handy right now if there was some kind of AI-controlled dropship buddy that could do a quick flyby so it could use its wings to cross— Oh, hey, what do you know? Some poor git apparently dropped his rocket launcher down here. Would be a shame to let it go to waste, especially with all of these explodable enemies around. Upper section here will see you carve your way through a pack of lunges while also giving you a rather nice view of where you've come from and where you've yet to reach. On that subject, the following area is being watched over by a pesky arc rail sniper tower, so naturally the only course of action here is to blast our way through its lower levels so we can go say hello. Surprisingly meaty fight to be had down here, packing a lot of action into a relatively confined space, which honestly is pretty par the course for most sections of this map. Clearing it out lowers the elevators, you can mince the sniper and then ride another elevator up to the roof where you'll have to blast your way through a Void Reaper before powering down that second and final anti-air emplacement. After that, it is a clear shot for you and your dropship when it comes to breaching the fortress. Yeah, if only it were that simple. You see, this map is nowhere near done being neat as all heck, and summarily dispatches a pair of attack ships from the fortress to intercept you mid-flight. This forces you into a mid-air fight that sees you jumping from ship to ship, clearing out the riffraff, disengaging the beams holding your ship in place, and holy shit, I love it, it's just so goddamn cool! Upon reaching the fortress itself, you'll discover that it has one last trick up its sleeve, consisting of a blast door and a force field blocking your way, so naturally you'll have to find a way to power it down. Handily, either side of the landing area here contains the generators that you need to go switch off. Of course, the enemy isn't just going to let you stroll in and do that, so of course you'll be spending most of your time here giving the immediate area a fresh coat of paint. Not much to say about this other than it's a good old-fashioned bloodbath, well-structured, well-paced, fairly challenging, and after you've flipped all of the requisite switches, the payoff here is getting to see your badass dropship melt a goddamn hole through the blast door with a great big sawed-off laser. I'd say that if there's only one, and I mean one, teeny little thing that leaves a bit of a sour taste in my mouth after what is, by all accounts, an absolute barn burner of a map, it's the fact that after all of that, you don't actually get to win. You don't actually get to collect that rune that's tantalizingly out of reach beyond the blast door at the very end. You see, before you can grab it, it's whisked away, and all you see at the end is this smug son of a bitch disappear into a portal, and I'll be honest, it's just a little bit of a deflating moment. All that blood and guts and the bad guys still get away with the prize. Oh well, guess it's back to the ship. Sure, we'll get the better of those dastardly chaos creatures next time, hopefully involving yet another ridiculously cool map featuring a badass dropship sidekick.
Do we have worm sign? Usul, we have worm sign, the likes of which even God has never seen.
Holy crap, what a way to open a map. Now I know what the briefing meant by oral infiltration. A real neat touch on the inside here is the fact that there's a bunch of corpses strewn about, suggesting that you're not the first guy to be fed to the... what is this called again? Oh yeah, the goddamn Biofortress! Hop skipping and jumping over the boating lake of bile here, you'll find it takes a few moments to acclimatize to the language of this particular map. After all, it's a fair degree more fleshy than most custom maps up until this point. Thankfully, some bioluminescent protrusions light the way, leading you to some destroyable membrane that'll allow you to infiltrate a little deeper. There's some light bone-based platforming, another bit of membrane, and then a section where you discover that some enemies here don't simply teleport themselves in, rather they emerge from the disgustingly moist walls of the Biofortress, replete with a green, snotty discharge. It's absolutely disgusting in the best possible way. Eventually you'll emerge into a larger chamber where small bits of tech start to creep into the biological design. It's also where you'll be able to bag yourself a shotgun, which is swiftly put to good use as crawlers erupt from the wall and yet more enemies spawn in. Heading up to a bony bridge, you'll be ambushed by what else but a tentacle erupting from the wall. Genuinely surprised when this happened, even more so when it started trying to whip me to death. The poor get wrapped up in the tentacle earlier should have been a bit of a warning for me, but either way, really cool touch. Destroying the tentacle will lead you on through to whatever the heck is going on down here. Flipping the switch spawns in a clutch of monsters for you to deal with, and once done, the machinery in the middle begins to malfunction. Taking the cracked glass as a clue, you'll blast it open, causing a torrent of blood to flow out and flood the chamber. Riding the blood tide upwards, which I might add is quite frankly a metal as fuck way to do simple level progression. You'll take out a few pesky spawns, and then enter a fleshy orifice that'll lead you to the red key. Passing through the red door here is very much a demarcation point for this part of the map, transitioning from the biological to the decidedly more technological. That said, it doesn't mean that this map is about to take a turn for the more traditionally mundane. Far from it. First up, we've got the airlock scanner, which folds down in an awesome way and rumbles you as very much a foreign object. I was honestly wondering how this was going to play out, considering I was now trapped in a force field cube, but thankfully a wall panel conveniently blows out just in time to continue my insertion and melt some faces. A quick rumble through this section lets you pop some hazmat zombies, ride the elevator up, get some ammo, and then, surprise, say hello to giant telekinesis-capable brain, also known as Organic Cogitator Unit 2. If this map wasn't already brimming with stuff that's neat as heck, this continues the trend. Battling your way through the outskirts of the brain chamber, you'll find yourself some shredders, blow a hole in the wall, watch a pile of flesh come spilling through, and then have to deal with an onslaught of enemies spawned in response, which, now that I think about it, starts to feel like antibodies attempting to fend off an infection. Rampaging on through, you'll discover that the Cogitator is still very displeased with your presence, as entry into the next section sees it levitating you via Psychic Pulse, close access to the following section, forcing you to take an alternate, much more enemy-intensive route. Reaching the opposing side sees the Cogitator launch a final attempt to bar your progress, but mercifully, you seem to be largely immune to being psychically exploded. The following control room sees you given the runaround with a pair of lunges and an assorted group of lower tier enemies before the corridor leads on to an encounter with a minigun. Mercifully, you'll also find a plasma gun in an overturned crate nearby. I mean, how convenient. Don't you just love it when that happens? Also, let's not forget the handy-dandy function that lets you use a secondary tracking dart to fire around corners. Moving on through these big, bulky doors, we find ourselves at the power core, which seems like it could be a nice venue for some good old-fashioned carnage. But before that, however, we've got a little bit of back and forth to deal with. The switch in the control booth needs a blue key, which is back in the core chamber, and a bunch of riffraff needs to be dealt with before the force field will drop and allow us to grab it. Oh hey, an arc rail. Don't mind if I do. Activating the switch overloads the core and, of course, summons a whole bunch of pissed off creatures into your immediate area. You know, shit's getting real when they wheel out the old Void Reaper. The action in the core chamber is satisfyingly chunky, and just when you think you're done blasting everything to smithereens, a bunch more literally bust down the door and offer you seconds. The Slayer here actually gave me a little bit of trouble, largely because I hadn't quite learned that it needed to be one of the first things I should put down yet, so yeah, buffed enemies, shockwave attacks, bit of a git. Blocked off from the exit by an active force field, you'll find your only option is to backtrack to the brain observation room, do a little bit of cleanup, and then find yourself greeted with the awesome sight that is the overloaded power core dumping so much energy into the cogitator that it literally explodes into glorious chunks that just slop against the chamber windows and slide down to the floor. Nice. As you might imagine, this sort of thing doesn't really fare all that well for the reactor of the biofortress, and given the prompt to evacuate, you'll backtrack to the exit door, which is now available and will lead you on through to a batch of evacuation pods. Now, honestly, this is where I thought I'd be greeted by an end-level screen, and quite frankly, I would have been happy with that, but I should have known by this point that Internal Disruption isn't a map intent on doing anything by half measures. The pod drills its way out through the flesh and earth before neatly depositing you back on the surface, where you're probably wondering where this level even has left to go. A rumble and a passing shadow make you glance upwards, witnessing what I imagine is the biofortress itself passing overhead, where it honest to god craps out some more enemies in the immediate area for you to deal with. Following that, the only option left is to use your weapons to break through some rocks concealing a tunnel entrance and move on through. You can probably imagine my excitement at wondering what could possibly cap off this frankly awesome map, and I was greeted by this quite frankly wonderful forced perspective shot, conveying a sense of distance and scale as the biofortress inches its way towards my position. An energy spike warning and a blinding flash of light later, everything is thoroughly obliterated. Holy shit, that right there is how you definitively end a map. Honestly, a wonderfully creative ride from front to back. I don't think it's going to be all that hard for many of you to understand why Internal Disruption turned out to be my favorite. So, this turned out to be a heck of a lot of fun. I feel like it's very much worth stating that there was absolutely not a single bad, or even mediocre for that matter, map in this batch. They were all cream of the crop, very much deserving of the top 5 positions. I feel like I've learned a fair bit about what I personally look for when it comes to judging maps in general. I feel like I'm always a fan of a little bit of novelty, a bit of inventiveness when it comes to playing around with the tools you've been given. I also just love a good concept. Some kind of storytelling, ambient or otherwise, threaded throughout, just gives me a little bit more to be invested in during the course of a map, other than, bad guys in base go boom boom. Even if that's still fun once in a while. All things considered though, PRODEUS is still in its early days, and personally, that excites me no end, because what we already have here, especially in regards to this phenomenal collection of custom maps, is just the beginning. For any of you eager to check these maps out, I'll be posting the titles and p-link codes which you can copy and paste in the custom level browser, and while you're at it, why not search up the MAPCORE tag to go check out the other entrants that didn't quite make the final cut, but are still pretty good in their own right. I know I certainly will be. And finally, big thanks to Jason Mojicas, hope I'm saying that right, one of the masterminds behind PRODEUS, for reaching out and granting me the wonderful opportunity to be involved as a MAPCORE guest judge. I honestly had a blast, and it genuinely helped clear out some mental cobwebs that have been plaguing me of late. If you want to say hi or just keep up with PRODEUS happenings, you can find him over on Twitter at GeneralVV, and if you've stuck around this far, you might as well throw in real-time VFX Mike and PRODEUS game into the mix. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video. I know I've not been anywhere near as frequent as I normally am when it comes to posting videos lately, and quite frankly, that's because parenting is a time sink, and I don't have anywhere near as much free time as I used to anymore. That said, I'm still going to be beavering away on projects from here on out. I'm not sure how the schedule is going to work, but, you know, stuff will come out eventually, I guess. And I'd be really happy if you stuck around to maybe watch them. That'd be nice. But yeah, until next time, this has been Mr. Icarus. Thank you very much for watching. Icarus out.